International foods that aren't really international foods.
There's a kind of food in the world.
All right, let me give you the syllabi. Here you go, John. Now, I am giving you a paper copy of the syllabus. Ben, if you'll pass the other two sheets down to Roger and Jeremiah. I will also, at the conclusion of this class period, go send you all an email inviting you to the Google Drive class folder. Well, there will also be a copy of the syllabus as well as 2 documents that I'm making available to you. And throughout the course of the term, should we want to share documents with one another, then they can also be made available there, as I've done in some of my classes, and you're probably used to. This is Greek Exegesis 1. It's a 3-credit course, and the purpose of this course, if you'll see in the objective section, is to increase your ability to use the standard tools of Greek exegesis, which includes editions of the Greek New Testament, lexicons, as well as grammars. Certain tools when you're reading New Testament Greek and doing Greek exegesis that you must become familiar with and even comfortable with. And one of the objectives of this course is to get you familiar with those tools. Secondly, we want to learn and utilize the exegetical process, including how to avoid exegetical errors. So, want to make you men competent interpreters of the New Testament, working from the standpoint of the Greek New Testament. Thirdly, and this is where we'll concentrate much of our time throughout the semester, an increased ability to read substantial portions of the Greek New Testament and to understand the grammar and syntax. So in the second semester of Greek last year, we went over the different grammatical and syntactical structures, uses of the different cases, uses of the participle, uses of the infinitive, etc. Or if you were in with us last term, perhaps you've had that training at another time and place. We want to build on that and get you more and more familiar with those categories so that as you read the Greek New Testament, you can correctly assess how the grammar is working, what it's saying, what the significance is, and use that profitably in understanding the text in order to teach it and preach it to your people. And Greek is one of those things where the only way to be able to do that well and quickly is to do a lot of it. It's a practice makes perfect type exercise, or perhaps perfect practice makes perfect, we could say. And then fourthly, of course, all this contributes to your ability to understand the main idea of a passage in the Greek New Testament. I think I've said more than once to you in my classes, if you can use Greek competently, it will do half the work for you in sermon preparation. If the main idea of a passage, if the main idea of a sermon is to be the main idea of the passage, then using Greek helps you discover what that main idea is. Furthermore, it also supplies you with the structure of a passage, which contributes to making an outline, and will show you the author's logic depending on the type of literature you're reading, thus supplying you with proofs and development of the main idea. Very often when I preach, or I should say very, very often when I teach, and pretty often when I preach, the structure of my sermon and the proposition has been determined simply by working through the Greek New Testament and understanding the structure of the argument. But this is where we go beyond simple parsing and grammatical labels to really understand structurally how the passage is working. We'll do some of that this term and next term as well. So towards that end, here are the books that you will need to use, and here are the assignments that you will need to complete. First, of course, you have to have a Greek New Testament. We have on site here the Greek New Testament according to the majority text, edited by Hodges and Farstad. That will provide the baseline text that we will work from in this class. Now, some of you may already own an edition of the Greek New Testament or have an electronic edition, and it may be even different from Hodges and Farstad. If you'd like to use that, that's fine. You don't have to go out and purchase another book. The only thing you want to be aware of, obviously, is in different editions of the Greek New Testament, obviously at times there are textual variants. So you just don't want to be missing something that I'm expecting you to analyze and share when we do our reading of the class together. So be aware of what the variants are. You may want to check with the majority text should you use a different edition that you already possess. But that is what we will be working from in class. Secondly, towards defining words, I recommend that you purchase this. It's called Little Donker. It's the Concise Greek English Lexicon of the New Testament, and that should likewise be in our book room here. Now again, if you already own a lexicon, I won't make you go out and spend whatever it is we're asking for this here or on Amazon. But maybe at least let me see what lexicon you're using, because some are better than others. Some of you may have an older version of this. That's okay. This is a really good one. If you can afford it, I recommend you get it. But if you're going to use a different lexicon, of course, just let me take a peek at it so I can make sure it's a good one that will serve you well. And then there will be 2 books that you're going to read, so you might as well buy them. The first one is this, Gordon Fee, New Testament Exegesis, a handbook for students and pastors. And secondly, Exegetical Fallacies by D.A. Carson. I do not own a print edition of that. I own a Kindle version. And so you, of course, are welcome to read it that way, too. It's usually cheaper to purchase in Kindle or Logos, etc. So you want to get that so that you can read through it. I don't think, well, let me not say that. I don't know if those are in our library or not. Both books are really worth owning anyway. So if you can get them, go ahead. And then I put on their textbooks 2 recommended textbooks. I think you've heard me mention this before, and if you haven't, you'll hear it 100 times. This is BDAG. I'm not going to lie to you. It costs a little bit of money. Print and electronic are both $125. But nonetheless, this is an indispensable tool for exegetical work. Whether or not you buy this term, I recommend you buy it at some point, and you must use this in your projects for me, such as your paper and your sermon. So I recommend that you bite the bullet at some point if possible and get a copy of it. We have in our library, I think, a previous edition. I don't know if we've got this one. If not, we need to. This is on the Logos computer, that laptop that sits in the computer room over there. So it's here and it's on site and you can get to it, but you'll want to own this and have it in your library at some point. And then finally, Wallace's Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics. I recommend you own a copy of that. If you have BibleWorks, one of the versions or later has that electronically, and that's fine. That's what I use primarily these days, is the electronic version. But his grammatical discussion and categories are indispensable, so I highly recommend you own that as well. And we will be making reference to that work throughout the term this semester. So what assignments are you looking at? The bulk of the class is going to be our weekly translation and analysis. If you peek real quickly at the back of the syllabus, you will see the 10 translation assignments. Here's how this is going to work. And those of you who were in my class last term will be somewhat familiar with this already, as we did this in Mark chapter 1, 2, and 3. Each week you're going to translate and analyze the assigned passage from the Greek New Testament. I would like you to write out your translation. You'll want to do that anyway, as well as parse and identify the grammatical usage of all nouns, participles, and infinitives. So notice what I am and what I'm not saying there. Parse and identify. That's the key, okay? So when you encounter a noun in the nominative case, you will want to parse that noun, and then you will want to also assign a usage to it. This nominative is functioning like a subject, or this nominative is functioning like a predicate, or this nominative is functioning absolutely, etc. You're going to want to assign a grammatical usage to that particular noun. You do not need to assess the articles. Every now and then I'll have you give me some, because I want you to understand the usage of the article. But I won't make you do that regularly for every passage. You don't need to assess the usage of the adjectives. Some teachers ask that, but you can skip that. If you see an adjective, you do not need to assess the usage of it. I would like you to do pronouns. All right, so all nouns and pronouns I want you to parse and analyze, as well, of course, as participles and infinitives. So here's the thing to remember. If you don't have to assign a grammatical usage to the word, then you don't have to show me the parsing. Does that make sense? Your translation you're going to write out for me. Your parsing and your analysis you're going to write out and turn in to me at the beginning of each week. And then we'll go together and read together to grade one another's work. If I don't require you to analyze a word, you don't have to put the parsing on there. So that will save you some busy work. You're going to have to parse it mentally because you're translating the passage and reading it. But you don't have to show the work for every verb, etc. Does that make sense? So, for example, when we come to 1 John, your very first translation assignment, which will be due on Thursday. 1 John chapter 2, verse 1. I've got it up here on the screen. Excuse me, I went to verse 15. If you go to verse 1, teknia mu, tauta grapho human, hiname hamar teta. All right, so you have teknia mu. You've got a noun and a pronoun there, my children. You've got a noun likely in the vocative case as he's addressing and writing to these children. And then you have this pronoun in the genitive case. So since that's a noun and a pronoun, you would parse those and you would then assign a usage to it. Notice, though, in the next phrase, tauta grapho humen. All right, once again, we have a pronoun, tauta, these things. All right, so you'd parse and analyze that. But then you have grapho. That's just a verb, so you don't have to tell me present, active, indicative, first singular from grapho. All right, you can leave that off your homework that you're turning in. Come to the third word, human. All right, that is once again a personal pronoun here in the dative plural. So I would like you to parse and analyze that. All right, so you see what you are doing and what you're not doing. Does that make sense so far? Yeah, good. You come to the next phrase there, hina me hamar teta. All right, that has some significance. Hina there, how is it functioning? It's followed by a subjunctive verb. Me is used as the negative particle because it's a non-indicative mood there. So how is hina functioning? Purpose, result, content. I may ask you a question like that in class, but you're not responsible to spell it out on the homework. Okay, the homework is when I do want you to work through the passage and have a good idea already in your mind of what it is saying, but you do not have to exhaust everything about the passage, etc. Same thing. Notice the next phrase, kai eon tis hamarte. See the eon there, that version of if, followed by the subjunctive mood once again. What kind of conditional sentence is that? Remember, we looked at first, second, third, and fourth class conditional sentences. Again, in class, I may ask you about that. Tell me about this kind of construction, but you're not responsible to tell me in advance. I simply want you to read the passage, translate it, parse and analyze the nouns, participles, and infinitives. Any questions on that so far? Calvin?
I did like an Excel spreadsheet.
That's fine. Okay. You can do it in whatever form you'd like. Computer, you can write it out, etc. Some combination of both. As long as when you turn it into me, I can figure out what you're doing and what you're saying. What you guys did last term worked great. I think, John, sometimes you even put it in a table, like a word table, and sometimes you had handwritten comments aside. That's all great. All right? And because you're going to turn that into me at the very beginning of each class. Keep a copy for yourselves, but I want to know when we come in Tuesday at 11, your work's already done. That there's not, 4 or 5 verses that you're still left to do. That the whole passage has been worked through prior to our class time. Obviously, the first passage is due this week in 2 days, and that is why I've given you a reading from 1 John. 1 John is easy Greek. So I have, knowing that you only have 2 days, I have given to you an easier style of Greek. When I took this class with Dr. Mike Barrett, we met Monday for syllabi, and 16 verses from Luke were due the next morning. So I've given you an extra day and a little easier Greek. So give you a chance to get your feet wet again, knock the rust off, and get back into the game. Notice that I say here in the translation, I say use the grammatical labels from Wallace, Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics. That may not have been the textbook we used last term. We used Black's. But let me say one thing now and then something else in just a minute. First of all, the labels are not radically different. Wallace simply has more of them, though the concepts are the same. But I think that will actually help you having a wider pool to choose from. And I'm going to give you a chance to familiarize yourself with Wallace's labels in the first week. But I'll say more about that in just a minute. Notice I do say then turn in the translation and the analysis at the beginning of the first class meeting of the week. The one exception to this will be week 6. That's the week of prayer. That is when we do not meet for lectures and class discussion, but nonetheless you still have assignments. So while I'm gone, you'll just email me your homework. Turn it in by the same time. I'll get it where we are in Canada. I'll grade it, send it back to you, and then when we come back together the following week, we'll just move on to number 7. Okay, so week 6 is assignment. There won't be an in-class discussion, but I'll grade it, offer comments, and then we'll just keep going when we resume. Let me give you a tip on how to make this reading smooth for you. You do not have to do it this way, but it is a recommended way. Notice there on that second bullet point under assignments under the weekly translation section, I say read through the passage several times in order to analyze it effectively. The first time you read, just note the words and phrases you know. The second time, don't stop to look up and analyze. The second time you read, look up the words you do not know and parse the nouns, participles, and infinitives. The third time you read, assign the grammatical use to the nouns, participles, and infinitives. Each time you're reading, you're going a little bit deeper, and the structure and the ideas are starting to settle in, and the unfamiliarity is starting to go away because the more you read it, now you're starting to look stuff up and become more familiar with it. Now you're free to just start from verse 1, slog your way through, and then look back on it when it's all done. That's great. I've got no problem with that. Here's the only thing I do say. Obviously, sometimes there are words that are nearly, if not nearly, just appear at least to be impossible to find. I can't figure out what this word is. I have no idea, etc. So if you do the 3 readings, then you may check your work with an English Bible, with a reader's or an analytical lexicon, or even a computer program like BibleWorks, Logos, and Accordance. Basically, those are works that parse the words for you. They won't give you a grammatical usage, but they'll at least parse it for you. Reading it in an English Bible will kind of give you an idea of the grammar and how to well translate. Looking in a reader's lexicon will tell you exactly what word you're looking for. So I'll let you use those helps if you give it 3 honest readings first. Otherwise, you may not use those tools in your work. Now, tools you can use on your first 3 readings, you can use your lexicon. You can go get Mounts back out and look at your paradigms. You can look in BDAG, because a lot of times BDAG at the beginning of an entry will list all the forms that word occurs in. So if you've got a good guess on the lexical form of the word, go to BDAG, and they might all be. It might tell you, oh yeah, that's an aorist, etc. And there it is. All right. So you're welcome to do all that in your first 3 readings, but none of the easy stuff that just gives you the answer. Not until you've tried 3 times through to figure it out. Fair enough? All right, good.
You mean this passage is the translation passage?
That is, yeah, your homework assignment. That's correct. Work through it 3 times, and then you can check your work and get some help. You can confer with one another, as long as you're not leeching off of one another. All right? Okay, good. Now, when you finish your assignment, I do want you to do this. I want you to look up all references from the assigned passage in Wallace. So in other words, what I mean by that is at the very end, he has a very lengthy scripture index, okay? Every time he refers to a particular verse, it ends up here. He even has a system for the page numbers. I think if it's just plain type, that means he just refers to it like in parentheses. If it's italicized, he has like maybe a short discussion, and then if it's bold and italicized, there's a lengthy discussion. So sometimes looking it up is just a matter of seeing, oh, he mentioned that in connection with the subjunctive genitive, move on. Sometimes it's a really tricky construction and it gives you a paragraph or 2 of really helpful discussion. So I do want you to look up in Wallace, wherever your passage occurs. So for 1 John, go find chapter 2 and look, verses 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, and 10. All right, that's where he refers to them. I don't even see any bold print, so it looks like this first one's pretty easy going. All right, second thing I want you to do after you've worked through your passage is look at the notes in the Net Bible. The Net Bible, it's the New English Translation. I think Wallace was part of the translation group behind it. They have a very extensive set of footnotes throughout the version, whereby they give hints on the grammatical structure of the Greek. Sometimes they give commentary, sometimes there's textual evaluation, but a lot of times it's helpful information on the original language. So if you get the electronic version of this syllabus, where you see Net Bible underlined, just click and you'll be there. Otherwise, you need to go to netbible.com and click the tab at the top titled Read. All right? So, translate and analyze, read Wallace's comments, read Net Bible's comments. That is what you're doing weekly. That's your main work. It will take you a few hours each week. The more you do it, the better you'll get. There will probably be weeks where you feel like, I'm not getting this is hopeless. That was my experience when I took this class. So I advise you just to continue working hard, come sit in my office if it's totally over your head, and we'll work through some stuff together. Like Chuck said, here to help. Here to help. This is not like the Mosaic Law where I want to show you how inadequate you are. This is to build you up and to help you become good readers of the New Testament. Just with learning a language, this is how you have to do it. You just got to use it. All right? All right. Any questions on weekly assignments? Ben?
So before we turn in our paper, can we correct our
Yep.
answer to
Yep.
these
Yep.
differences?
Yep, that would be great. That would be great. You're going to turn in your work and keep a copy for yourself. So make a photocopy, whatever, scan it, whatever. And then when we meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays, what we'll do is, like last year, I'll call on one of you to read a verse and analyze orally, and then we'll discuss anything that comes up. If it launches us into a discussion of a particular structure, I'll give helpful comments, mini lecture, explaining things, and we'll just work through verse by verse. That could possibly fill all 4 hours. If it doesn't, and we stop a little early, you guys can just go. If we're left with a big chunk of time, I'll pick a topic and give you some instruction on it. Good. Okay, let's talk about some reading assignments. And when it comes to actual page numbers, this isn't that hefty. And none of these are going to be of the kind where you're writing me a review or whatnot. So let's look at what I want you to read. I want you to read Wallace's syntax summaries. Here's what that is. That's a roughly 30-page section at the end of Wallace's grammar, where he summarizes in outline form the whole book. Okay? So he gives you nominative, all the usage, one-sentence explanation of what it means. I have printed this from the BibleWorks version, scanned it, and put it in the class folder. It's 28 pages of 8.5 by 11. All right? I want you to read that before we come to class next week. So when we meet on Thursday and analyze 1 John, if you're using labels that aren't in Wallace, that's okay. But after you've read Wallace, which you will do before we meet next Tuesday, I want you to use the labels in Wallace. So when you tell me this is a nominative of whatever, ideally it needs to come from here. If you want to use a different word and you can explain what you're trying to say and you're convincing, great. But otherwise, he really covers all the bases. So you should be able to find something in here that correctly explains how the grammar's working. All right, and I know we didn't work through all of this last term, but if you read those summaries, you at least have the labels in front of you, and you will see an overlap of concept. By the way, in that same doc, there's also 10 or 11 page, what he calls a cheat sheet, where it's just list all the uses of the nominative, all the uses of the participle, all the uses of the infinitive, and you can just peek at that real quick while you're working through them in your mind. You don't have to read that, but that's there for you to use to your benefit. So do that before next Tuesday morning. I'm going to have you read 2 articles. You will need to read these within the first 7 weeks of class. Okay, so you have 7 weeks to read 2 articles. One is called Using BDAG. This is an appendix in the late Dr. Decker's Koine Greek Reader. That book is in our library, and the appendix is on pages 245 through 62. So if you want to go grab it, scan it, or if you just want to sit down with it one night in the library, grab BDAG and have it there beside you. Just read through Decker's explanation. There's a ton of information and abbreviations and stuff in BDAG. What he just does is he says, here's why all this is here. Here's what it's saying. Here's how to find the information you're looking for. And I think that'll benefit you. Secondly, you read the article by the same author, How Do We Use the Biblical Languages, which is, again, just another kind of reminder of their importance and also how we can use them responsibly to help God's people. I have made a PDF of that available in the course folder. And then 2 books. I do want you to read Fee, and I do want you to read Carson. You don't have to write me a summary. You don't have to work through it in agonizing detail. All right? We've talked, I think, about different levels of reading. There's that micro reading where you really focus in on the details. There's the macro reading where you read to get the main idea and the main content. And then there's the skimming. All right, this is kind of in between. Don't skim it, but don't feel like you've got to read every footnote in painstaking detail. Read it, see what he's saying, and benefit from it. Fee has basically what Fee's book does is it outlines the exegetical process, and it does it for all of the different types of literature in the New Testament. And I would like you to use his exegetical process when you write your paper. You don't have to show me how you're doing it, but he'll give you step by step. Here's how you do exegesis in order to write a paper. If you follow that, it will help you and you'll write a good quality paper. So you want to read him well enough to be able to do that.
Is that for a paper?
The process in Fee, I would like you to use when you write your paper, which I'm coming to now for your exegetical projects. Any question on the reading? All right, good. So here's your projects, too. Number 1, I want a 4-page sermon on 1 Peter 2, 1 through 10. This is where you flesh out that idea that the main idea of the biblical text becomes the main idea of the sermon. And by the time you turn this in, at the end of week 5, you'll have worked through a handful of passages, and you'll be able to start doing this. You do not need to manuscript a sermon for me. I would like you to write out the introduction, so give me a written out introduction, but then the rest of the 4 pages can basically be a thick outline. Your main points, your explanatory material, applications, illustrations, put all those in there as appropriate. Don't feel like you got to force it. If it's a sermon where there's just not a really good illustration, hey, that's fine. But if it's appropriate and it works, use it. If you are a manuscripter, you want to type me out a 4-page manuscript, just make sure it's enough material there where if you were to preach it, it would be more in 10 or 15 minutes. Okay? So make it a full sermon and just do whatever note style you're used to doing and you're comfortable with. I want you to use your Greek knowledge. I want you to write a sermon that's better than what you would have written had you done it for me last week. All right? But I want you to avoid making this a technical discussion. I don't want to see in the presentation of the material Greek terminology, grammatical ideas. I want the substance, okay? I want the cookies, the fruit of your labor in your sermon. So this is a place where you develop that skill of going from text to sermon. That's due Friday midnight at the end of week 5. So in other words, when we get ready to go to week of prayer, you need to turn that in. And then secondly, write me a paper, 8 to 10 pages. Drop that down from the 12 to 15 that I sometimes do. 8 to 10 pages, use the Turabian format. Exegetical paper on Romans 2, 1 through 16. You do not have to treat every single verse with the same detail. Simply use your knowledge of Greek grammar to discern the main idea of the passage and then show me Paul's flow of thought in verses 1 through 16. What point is he making? What's he arguing? You have to deal with matters of interpretation there as relates to the law and faith and works and righteousness. And I want you to show how Greek exegesis helps you discover the meaning of the passage, articulate a development of thought, and write a good explanatory exegetical paper for me. This is a little different from a sermon. You're not preaching to me. This is where you show me your technical skills, okay? Because the better your technical skills are, it makes you a better thinker, makes you a better interpreter of the word, and thus a better preacher. That's the point of it. I do want to see at least 15 sources. 5 of those need to be journal articles that address issues of interpretation in Romans 2. For the other 10 sources, commentaries are fine, or anything else you find that helps you in preparing the paper. And this will be due by our first class meeting on week 10, so that I can have time to grade it, give it back to you before your exam. Questions on the projects? Good. Is that a question? Yes, sir.
I have an example of the project.
Mm-hmm.
You have.
Yeah, I will put a copy of papers that I have written like this in the course folder when we're done. So let me just make a note of that. If you took NTT, you have seen something like it. That Revelation paper, for example. But I'll put some other, maybe the Romans 7 one in there. That might be a little more helpful. I know the Revelation one got more systematic. So I'll put a paper example in the folder. Okay? Good. All right, other questions on the projects? Okay, lastly, final exam. Basically what's going to happen is you'll walk in on whenever you choose to take your exam. You will have 2 hours to translate and analyze a passage that will be revealed to you at that time. All right, you can use your Greek New Testament, shorter lexicon, or whichever lexicon you use. If you can grab BDAG, get it. You can use a grammar, such as Wallace. If you guys want to coordinate when you're taking the exam so that all the resources are available, go for it. But you'll sit down, 2 hours, here's the passage, tell me everything you can. I might even throw in some 5 or 6 suggested, make sure you address this, etc. stuff. All right? Good. All right, well, I'm excited. I think this class will go well, and that you all will do well. Notice there the schedule, each of your translation assignments, a reminder of when your assignments are due. For the reading, you just got to tell me, yes, I read it. And then very bottom of the page, there's a breakdown of the grade scale. Notice that your weekly translation and analysis constitutes almost 50% of your grade, 25 points for 10 assignments. So make sure those are turned in. Make sure they're turned in on time. Coming to me at Tuesday at 9 or 11 or whatever and saying, I've got 5 verses left, that's going to whack your grade bad. So you just don't want to do that, okay? It's hard work. It's tiring. It's not fun at times, but it's rewarding if you persevere. So the first one, granted, you got a little less time. We're going to go over it Thursday at 11. You got to turn it into me by then. Then you get a little more time for next Tuesdays. I give you John again. I'm a softie. And then going forward, you've got a full week each time for each passage. So, gentlemen, any questions on any of that? All right, good. Jeremiah.
What would you do to brush up on this stuff?
On the...
Like on paradigms,
Mhm.
vocab, just all that.
Yeah. For paradigms...
That's going to help with, translations.
Yeah. Yep. For paradigms, you have that book, Mounts. There's a copy here if you need one, or you can always just even photocopy the relevant pages from mine or one of your students. He has in the back of his textbook all the paradigms. Here's all your verb paradigms. Here's all your noun paradigms. Write them out once a week. Write them out until you can recite them from memories.
So like the Luo.
Yep, your luo and then your nouns, etc. I've got some handouts I can give you if you want them. Email me if you do. It's all the vocabulary used in the Greek New Testament, like 50 times or more, and it's just some vocab sheets you can brush up on. Memorizing all that helps you parse quicker, but really the best practice will be just simply doing it, because the hard part about going from paradigms to the text is you're going from deductive to inductive. So rather than seeing something in the context of a paradigm, now here's this word all alone in a sea of words. looks very different from the way you saw it in your paradigm or saw it in your exercises, and suddenly you got to figure out, what is a cone? How is that related to echo? Why has epsilon become eta? Why has O become omega nu, etc.? And that can be, that can throw you for a loop. And your second aorist forms, obviously. So the best way is to read through it. But the more you have memorized, it does help you go a little quicker. For grammatical labels and such, the Wallace syntax summary should serve you well in that regard. So, okay, good. Roger?
For the books, is there anything available to buy here or need to order?
Let's check. Forgive me, I did not check that in advance. I know Wallace and Little Donker are in there. I cannot remember if Fee... Okay, we don't have Fee and Carson. And I think our normal pattern that we've done now is to wait really until everybody is signed up for the class and then let Jennifer place you in order. So I would just, if you need it, tell her. It will be here within a few days. And all the reading that's coming due immediately, I've given you. So good. Anything else? All right. Good work, guys, and do well. And I will see you Thursday at 11.